Everyone saw the blood on her face, but no one asked why. No one except me. My wife didn't scream when his fist connected. She didn't gasp. She just fell. The sound was worse than the sight, a dull, bone-deep crack against the hard earth, followed by silence. Not the normal kind of silence. The kind that swallows birdsong, wind, thought, everything. She was sprawled out on our lawn, dazed, bleeding, one palm scraping at the grass like her mind was trying to reboot reality. And the man who did it stood over her like he'd just written a parking ticket. His lips moved with bureaucratic coldness. Section 7, unauthorized fence height. That's what it was about. A fence. A piece of wood 3 inches taller than his fake rule book allowed, but it didn't start with the punch, it started with boots. I was in the garage, half listening to some podcast, working a hinge with an old wrench when I heard them. 3 sets. Heavy, deliberate. Not the walk of neighbors dropping by, not the shuffle of delivery men. Boots like they were here to extract someone. I didn't know yet that my wife, Lena, was about to become their target. She'd been in the backyard, yoga mat rolled out on the grass, her way of pushing back against stress. Quiet breaths, stretching, sunlight warming her shoulders. Lena always said yoga wasn't just for her, it was for me. It was her way of grounding both of us when the world tilted, and then the world tilted hard. 3 men came through our side yard, black tactical vests, earpieces, HOA patches stitched so cheaply it looked like someone printed them on a cricut. Cosplay commandos. I heard their leader's voice, flat, rehearsed. "Ma'am, we need to confirm elevation compliance." Lena didn't rise, didn't panic. She just looked up, calm as ever, and said, "Is that code for get off my property?" That was my wife, unshaken, unflinching, always stronger than I deserved. I stepped out just in time to see them sizing her up. Clipboard guy, chest GoPro guy, and behind them, Karen, standing smug on her porch across the street, like she was directing a TV drama about suburban law and order. The HOA's queen bee, always buzzing where trouble brewed. "You're obstructing perimeter visibility," clipboard guy barked. Lena stood tall, unbothered. "We got a notice, we appealed, it's pending." "Pending doesn't mean compliant," he said, stepping closer. "And pretending doesn't make you an officer," she shot back. That was when it happened. No warning, no hesitation. A grown man in fake tactical gear swung his fist into my wife's face. She hit the ground, and for a half second I froze. Not because I'm weak, because I've been here before. Fall 2011, overseas. Rookie in my unit hesitated when a man reached for his jacket. That hesitation cost 2 lives. I've lived with that memory every day since. And now, here it was again. Only this time it wasn't a teammate, it was Lena. The wrench in my hand slipped, clanged against the concrete. That metallic echo snapped me loose. I moved. By the time I reached her, she was on her knees. Blood down her lip, cheeks swelling, one nostril already packed with crimson. But she didn't cry, didn't scream. She looked up at me with those steady eyes and whispered, "That's gonna bruise." I turned to him, my voice was low, dangerous. "You just hit a combat medic for offense." He shrugged. She resisted compliance. From across the street, Karen's syrupy voice chimed in like nails on glass. "She's obstructing the neighborhood line of sight. That's a safety issue." I didn't even look at her. "Karen," I said flatly, "film this next part." Lena spat blood into the grass, pushed herself to her feet. She squared her shoulders, looked that coward in the eyes, and said, "Swing at me again, and I won't wait for backup." The man's bravado cracked, just for a moment. His mask slipped, and I saw the fear under it. "Threatening an official," he started. But before he could finish, Benji, my neighbor, rake in hand, stepped between them. "You punched a medic, genius. Think we're scared of your clipboard cosplay." I stepped forward, shoulders squared. "You assaulted a veteran on her property, without authority, on camera, in a fake uniform. Do you have any idea how many felonies that is?" He backed up, his eyes darting. The tough act evaporated like steam. I didn't need to swing, didn't need to raise my voice. All I had to do was take one step closer. They left, like bullies who just realized the skinny kid knows jiu-jitsu. Karen's smug grin wavered, but she stayed quiet. Lena turned to me, steady despite the bruise swelling on her face. "Do I look broken?" I met her eyes. No, but they're going to be. That night when the neighborhood lights went out and the world tried to settle into silence, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the HOA manual, that bloated brick of bylaws. I read every word, every loophole, every forgotten clause, and on page 87 I found it. Section 12. C. Enforcement reps must have written consent of entry signed by the homeowner or formal authorization from a municipal governing body. They didn't have consent, they didn't have authorization. And they sure as hell didn't have a clue what was coming. Everyone saw the bruise the next morning, but no one dared to ask. Not at the grocery store, not on her walk, not when we passed Karen's pastel-painted house. But I saw it, and it burned me alive inside. Lena stood in front of the bathroom mirror, tracing the swelling under her eye like it was war paint. Her lips split, one nostril stuffed with gauze, and yet she smiled. Not wide, just enough to sting me. "That's gonna look real cute in tomorrow's HOA meeting," she muttered, calm, amused, as if she hadn't been punched by a grown man in cosplay gear. I stood behind her, towel in hand, staring at the purple bloom spreading across her cheek. "You're not supposed to look like you enjoyed that." She tilted her head, studying the reflection. "I didn't enjoy the punch, I'm enjoying the reaction." She meant me because I hadn't stopped shaking since last night. Not outwardly, no trembling hands, no panicked packing, but inside my blood was a live wire, taut, humming, ready to snap. She pressed an ice pack to her face. "You know what's funny? When I was deployed, you could always tell who was cracking. It wasn't the ones who yelled, it was the ones who got quiet." I turned away, my jaw tight. "I'm not cracked." "You're reading bylaws at 3 a.m. with a highlighter," she said, smirking. "That's cracked." Downstairs, Benji was making bacon like his life depended on it. The smell filled the house, greasy and comforting. "Comfort meat," he shouted from the kitchen. "This is how my people heal." Lena limped down in yoga pants, bruise on full display. Benji turned, nearly dropping the skillet. "Holy crap, you look like a Bond girl post-explosion. Do we get revenge now or after breakfast?" "Soon," Lena said, sliding into a chair, her voice even. "John's got a plan." They both looked at me, and I held up the HOA manual like it was a cinder block. "We're gonna build a case." Benji groaned. "Of course you are." But this wasn't just about building a case. It was about building a weapon. Every weird citation, every forced sale, every contradictory clause in that handbook, I wasn't just compiling evidence. I was shaping a blade. Lena fired up her laptop. 5 families moved out this year alone, 4 were veterans, and look, every single one cited for different nonsense. Fence height, parking orientation, unauthorized holiday lights. I tapped the whiteboard I'd dragged into the living room. The pattern isn't the citation, it's the people. They're targeting those they think won't fight back. Lena's eyes narrowed. "But we will." Benji grinned. "Oh, we'll fight back, like angry lawn gnomes of justice." But the war came sooner than expected. That afternoon, Karen struck. Not with fists, not with enforcers, with a neighborhood-wide email blast. Subject line, Community Harmony Update from HOA Board. She wrote in elegant cursive fonts, dripping with fake grace. "In times of unrest, it's important we preserve the beauty and order of our community. Noncompliance threatens that peace. We must remember safety isn't just about locks and alarms. It's about unity, conformity, and trust." Benji read it aloud, groaning. "She's threatening us in cursive. That's actually impressive." Lena's smirk vanished. She stared at the screen, jaw tightening. "She thinks we'll break, that's what she's betting on." Then her eyes found mine. "But you haven't smiled once since last night." "I'm not in a smiling mood," I admitted. "You're too calm," she whispered. "That scares me more than the punch." I met her gaze steady, because now it's a game I know how to win. So I dug deeper, county filings, shell companies, the HOA's budget allocations. My desk turned into a war table, highlighters, printouts, maps, spreadsheets. At some point, I forgot to eat. Benji tried distracting me with prank ideas involving flamingos and glitter bombs. Lena made grilled cheese like she was diffusing explosives. None of it mattered. My mind was locked in. Then I found it. An old clause buried in the original HOA charter. External enforcers shall not operate on private property without express consent or verified emergency orders. It was like unearthing a buried weapon. I sat there in the dark, the document glowing on my laptop screen, whispering, "Got them." Lena had fallen asleep on the couch, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, defiant even in rest. Benji snored beside the printer that jammed every third page. I stood there holding that clause like it was scripture. We had them. But before I could move on the offensive, the war escalated. The next morning, I opened the door to find a manila folder waiting on the mat. No postage, no envelope, just left there deliberately. Inside, a printout of our fence citation, but stapled to it was a photo. Not of our lawn, not of the house. Of Lena. Taken from the hallway, inside our home. Her back turned, no timestamp, no watermark, just her walking unaware. My grip tightened. My pulse thudded so hard I felt it in my teeth. And scrawled in red ink across the page, "We're always watching. Compliance begins at home." That was the moment I understood. This wasn't about fences, or lawns, or rules. This was about power. And they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. Because they broke into my house, not to steal, not to hurt. Just to let me know they could. Everyone thinks the worst sound in the world is glass breaking in the middle of the night. It's not. It's silence. The silence that follows when you realize someone's already been inside your home. That photo of Lena in the hallway, it wasn't just a threat. It was proof. Proof that they'd crossed our threshold. Proof that no lock, no wall, no sense of peace was safe. I didn't shout, didn't panic. Instead, I tore the house apart, methodical, precise, room by room. Inch by inch. I flipped smoke detectors, unscrewed outlet plates, searched for pinhole lenses in the ceiling lights. I even cut open a piece of drywall behind the bookshelf, following nothing but gut instinct. Nothing, no bugs, no wires, no cameras, just silence. But silence wasn't peace anymore. Silence was surveillance. Silence was the predator circling. Lena sat barefoot at the kitchen island, ice pack on her knee, watching me move like a medic watching a soldier bleed out inside. "You're spiraling," she said softly. "No," I replied, voice flat. "I'm prepping." Benji showed up 20 minutes later, arms loaded with gas station snacks and duct tape. "I brought offerings," he announced, dumping them on the counter. "Also, if we're about to Fort Knox this place, I want full nerd access." So we did it. We turned our home into a fortress. Trip sensors, pressure plates, reflective tape across thresholds, a decoy motion sensor rigged to the mailbox, real cameras hidden in garden gnomes and behind a fake bird bath, IR overlays that would ping my phone the second someone stepped onto the lawn. Not paranoia, strategy. Because once you realize your home isn't private anymore, you either panic or prepare. And at 2:14 a.m., preparation paid off. The silent alert hit my phone. 3 figures moving fast, no flashlights, one with a clipboard, one with a bag, one scanning lawns with night vision goggles like he was hunting houses. Benji's whisper cracked over the headset. "Why is it always 3 guys with a clipboard? Is that like HOA doctrine?" "SHH," I hissed. "Positions." They split, 2 jumped the neighbor's fence, 1 crouched at our irrigation box. Clipboard guy poured something down the line. My blood went cold. Sabotage, chemical, HOA warfare. I slid out the side door, Lena flanking the west fence like she'd done 100 times on deployments. Benji activated a fake garage floodlight, blinding them for half a heartbeat. Clipboard guy bolted. 2 escaped clean over the alley wall, but 1 I caught. He wasn't older than 20. Hoodie, not uniform, sweat plastered to his hair. I pinned him against the fence, 1 arm twisted behind his back. "You with Karen?" I growled. He squirmed. "I'm just part-time, man, I don't know anything." I shoved a flashlight in his face. "Smile for the camera." Lena appeared beside me, phone raised, calm and steady. "You entered our property, you tampered with utilities, that's a felony." The kid blinked fast, panicked. We were told no one lived here full time. My blood iced. Lena didn't flinch. Who told you that? He stammered. Third key compliance contractor. They handle removals. Removals, I snarled. I don't know names, I swear. I just spray the stuff and leave. Benji's voice cracked through the comms. I just cross-checked that company. They're registered under 5 different shell LLCs in 3 states. This isn't an HOA, it's a flipping eviction cartel. The kid's eyes widened when he realized we weren't bluffing. I let him go with one last warning. Next time, I won't be the one asking questions. He bolted into the dark. Back inside, Lena inspected the irrigation box. She dabbed the chemical with a rag, sniffed, her face tightened. Copper sulfate, root killer. They were poisoning our yard, I muttered. She nodded grimly. Long game kill. Once the plants die, they cite us for neighborhood degradation, force us into fines, then foreclosure. And at dawn, like clockwork, a new notice appeared taped to our door. Violation, vegetative noncompliance, root exposure, ornamental decay, immediate attention required. They had the gall to fine us for the sabotage they committed. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it meant one thing: they were panicking. That night, reviewing the camera footage, I noticed something strange. The birdhouse cam, the one I'd found hidden in the neighbor's yard, had moved. Its angle no longer pointed at us. It pointed directly into Karen's upstairs office. And the feed was still live, not to us, to someone else. Which meant Karen wasn't the queen after all. She was being watched, too. I traced the signal. It bounced through 6 encrypted nodes, not an HOA server, not a neighbor, not local at all. Whoever set that camera wasn't on our side, but they weren't on hers either. At 2:36 a.m., my server pinged. Not from my system, from someone else's. A mirrored file directory hidden inside a housing app the HOA used for pool reservations. It wasn't tracking pool hours. It was tracking us. I cracked the encryption in 11 minutes flat. Rage makes you fast. Fear makes you sharper than caffeine. The file was titled Compliance Retention Tier Index. Inside, rows of names, addresses, mortgage balances, branch of service. Column C, risk factor, high, moderate, low. Next to Lena's name, high. Next to mine, unrecoverable. Beside that, requires escalation if not vacated by Q3. I didn't breathe for 10 seconds, then I read line by line. 43 entries, veterans, widows, quiet retirees with equity and no backup. People I knew, the woman 3 doors down who baked cinnamon bread every Sunday, the man who taught my son to fish, names I'd waved to for years. They weren't rebels, they weren't troublemakers. They were targets. And when I finally found my own name on that list, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit until now. This wasn't an HOA anymore. This was war. Everyone thought they were alone. That's how predators work, make each victim feel isolated, convinced no one else is going through it. But the moment I projected that spreadsheet onto the garage wall, I saw the illusion shatter. Rows of names, mortgage balances, risk ratings stamped like a death sentence. 43 entries in total, veterans, widows, retirees, people who'd built lives here who thought the worst thing they'd ever face was a noisy lawnmower or a bad paint job, not targeted eviction under the disguise of community compliance. You're all on the list, I told them, voice steady, the words heavier than gunfire. And they're coming for you next, not with guns, not with trucks, but with paperwork, fines, and legal trapdoors. The air was thick. Neighbors shifted uneasily, some whispering, others staring wide-eyed at the glowing names. Mr. Alvarez spoke first. He was older, silver hair, still carried himself like the Marine he used to be. He held up 2 folders, hands shaking. I've been keeping these, citations I never filed appeals for, thought no one would listen, thought maybe it was just me. Mrs. Patel stood next. Sunglasses at night, scarf around her head. When she removed them, the truth cut deeper than any fine, bruises along her jaw. They egged my house last week, she whispered. I didn't report it. I was afraid they'd know I left home again. The Mitchells walked in like ghosts, hollow-eyed, silent, carrying the weight of 3 separate foreclosures within their family. They didn't need to speak. Their presence was testimony enough. I stood in front of the projection like I was briefing a platoon before a breach. Some of you have 2 weeks, others less. They're targeting equity. They know who can be squeezed quietly and who needs a scare tactic. It's not about lawns, it's not about fences, it's about flipping your homes for 6-figure margins. A murmur swept through the crowd. Fear, anger, recognition. They told me my garden statue was spiritually misaligned with community tones, Mrs. Patel said bitterly. I thought they were just being cruel. They were, Lena answered firmly, stepping up beside me. And calculated. Benji flipped to another tab on his laptop, projecting financial logs. They've mapped your equity. They know who's worth pressuring, who's worth bankrupting, who's worth bleeding dry. Alvarez slammed a fist against his palm. So what do they get from this? A return, I said. This isn't about peace or property values, it's about profit. They force you out, sell to contractors, and flip the homes. Mrs. Patel's voice cracked. I thought this was my last home. I thought I'd die here. Lena crossed the room, knelt by her side, and took her trembling hand. It still can be. The room went quiet, a collective silence of realization, the kind that settles in right before a fight. That afternoon, Karen came to our door. No clipboard this time, no smug pastel outfit, just her raw nerves behind a paper-thin smile. You've been busy, she said. Sorry, I replied. Didn't schedule this conversation through the HOA app. She ignored the jab, eyes darting, desperate. I know what you've seen. You mean the evidence? I asked. I mean the structure, the system, she hissed, lowering her voice. It wasn't supposed to be visible. You hit a for-profit foreclosure racket behind garden bylaws. Don't be dramatic. Lena appeared beside me, arms crossed, her bruise still fresh, defiance written across her face. Tell that to the widow you labeled pushy in your notes. Karen blinked, and for the first time I saw something new, fear, not of us, of whoever was above her. You're a soldier, John, she said softly, almost pleading. You understand chain of command. This isn't yours to stop. No, I said, stepping closer, but it's mine to expose. And then she whispered something I wasn't supposed to hear. They told me if I kept things quiet, I could keep my home. That was the deal. Who's they? I demanded. Her silence was answer enough. That night I reviewed the birdhouse camera feed again. Karen's office lit up like a confession booth. She paced, phone in hand, frantic, and then I saw it. In the reflection of the window behind her, a figure, broad-shouldered, gray suit, standing still, watching her from the shadows. On his hand, a ring, not jewelry, military issue, special clearance. The kind I'd seen overseas, worn by men whose names never made it into reports. Lena leaned over my shoulder. Her voice was barely a whisper. Do you know him? No, I said, but I know what he represents. Benji leaned in. So Karen's not running the show. No, I murmured. She's not a queen, she's barely staff. This isn't a rogue HOA, it's a vet filtering pipeline, a housing chessboard, and Karen, she's just the pawn they let feel powerful before they sacrifice her. The man in that reflection wasn't HOA, he was federal. And if he was watching Karen, then we weren't just fighting neighbors with clipboards, we were up against something far bigger. The next move was ours. I didn't wait for the HOA meeting to start. Didn't wait for open comments. I walked right down the center aisle like I owned the place, because morally I did. Karen stood at her podium draped in lavender and fake grace, microphone clipped, HOA seal behind her. But the mask was slipping. She saw Lena first, then me, then the thick folder in my hand. If you'd like to speak during open comments, we'll get to that shortly, she began. Sure, I said, voice low, cutting. Right after we expose your racketeering. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone dropped a lemon bar. Benji tapped his phone. The projector behind Karen glitched, then came alive with the spreadsheet. Names, addresses, risk ratings, mortgage balances. The room turned on her instantly. A man stood pointing. "That's my house." A woman near the back raised her hand, trembling. "My mother's name is on there. She passed away 2 months ago, but the citations kept coming." "You build corpses?" Benji muttered under his breath. Karen's mask fractured. She fluttered, stammered. "We don't control the billing process." I clicked the projector. Her signature filled the screen. Digital, time-stamped, ugly. "You targeted veterans, widows, neighbors for profit," I said. "Tell us what context justifies that." She had no answer. And for the first time, the neighborhood wasn't afraid anymore. Everyone waited for Karen to answer, but her silence was louder than any excuse. Neighbors shifted in their chairs, some angry, some stunned, some just heartbroken. "You fined me 4 times for the color of my mailbox," a man in the second row barked. "And me," a woman added, voice trembling. "You told me my garden gnome was, what did you say? Behaviorally inappropriate." Benji leaned in, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. "I don't even know what that means." Karen cleared her throat, trying to regain control. Her voice was shaky, but the script was still there. "The HOA exists to preserve order, protect property values, and ensure a welcoming environment." "Welcoming for who?" Lena shot back. Silence. "For people who don't ask questions," I said, stepping closer. "For buyers who won't challenge forged citations, for widows too tired to fight back." The crowd murmured, their anger sharpening. The illusion of community had cracked. The queen bee was losing her hive. Alvarez rose from the back, his voice strong, weathered. "Is this why my last appeal disappeared? Because I was on your list?" Mrs. Patel clutched her scarf tighter. "They told me my front steps were unsafe. Then they offered to buy me out. Is that safety or theft?" Karen's hands trembled on the podium. "You don't understand." "No," I said. "We finally do." The treasurer stood abruptly. "I'm done. I never agreed to any of this." He pushed his chair back so hard it scraped against the tile. The secretary followed. "You told us this was about safety. This is fraud." Karen reached for them as they walked away, desperation leaking through her smile. "Please, don't let him twist this." "No one twisted anything but the bylaws," the treasurer snapped. I stepped to the projector, switching to the second file. The one I'd held back until now. Emails, contracts, confidentiality clauses, payout structures. Lena read them aloud, steady, one by one. By the third email, half the room was filming. By the fourth, 2 more board members stormed out. Karen's composure bled away. "This has been taken out of context." "Then put it back in," I cut her off. "Tell us what context justifies targeting veterans and widows for foreclosure profit." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That's when Mrs. Patel, quiet, cardigan-wrapped Mrs. Patel, stepped to the mic. Her voice shook, but her words didn't. "We've been ruled by silence long enough. Today we speak." The room erupted. Applause, shouts, gasps. The spell was broken. The fear was gone. Karen's eyes darted to me, then to Lena, then back to the crowd. She wasn't in control anymore. She was surrounded. One last attempt. "I didn't want to do this," she said, her voice breaking into rehearsed tears. "But there are people above me. You don't understand the pressure." "We do," I said. "You made sure we all felt it." And then the final blow. Benji tapped the projector, cueing the hidden video file we'd decrypted. The room fell silent as Karen's voice filled the speakers. Not here, not now, but in her own office, recorded from that birdhouse camera. Her voice was smaller, nervous. "We're behind on Oak Gate. Lot 312 was scheduled last quarter." A man's voice cut in. Cold, detached, federal. "Irrelevant, the wife is flagged high interference, former military medic classification, that's unstable optics." Karen's voice trembled. "I need more time, there's a kid on the property." "Then write the narrative," the man replied. "Safety hazards, structural rot, you know how to make it stick." Gasps erupted in the room. Someone cursed under their breath. Karen's face drained of color. The video continued. The man's voice again. Oak Gate is a corridor acquisition. Transition resistance or vacate your position. Deliver results and you'll be shielded. The video cut to static. Silence pressed down on every shoulder. No one cheered, no one shouted. They just stared at us at the truth. This wasn't HOA business, I said, breaking the silence. This is organized displacement, targeted, profit-driven, federal hands pulling strings while Karen played queen. For once, Karen didn't argue, she just stood there, small, shaking, alone. And then the knock came. Not on my door, not in some dark alley, right there in the middle of the meeting. Two men walked in, black suits, badges flashed, not police, not city code, federal. The crowd parted like water. Karen's tears returned, this time real. Please, I did everything they asked. They didn't answer. They just walked past her podium, uninvited, unstoppable. One boxed up her files, the other clipped cuffs around her wrists. Karen didn't resist. She didn't scream. Queens don't always go out in flames. Some go out in silence. Neighbors filmed, phones raised. No one looked away. That night back home, we sat in silence. No high fives, no victory speeches, just relief heavy and raw. Benji typed quietly on his laptop. Facebook stream hit 27,000, Reddit's already grabbing clips. Lena sat cross-legged on the floor, folder beside her. She looked up at me. You okay? Not yet, I admitted. And then another knock. Not at the door this time. On my inbox. No subject, no sender, just one sentence. Nice work, ready for the next round. Attached a file, labeled Tier 2 development zones. Dozens of neighborhoods, ours was just the prototype. I didn't know what was worse, that someone sent me classified data or that the email included footage of me opening it, from a camera I didn't install. They weren't just watching Karen anymore. They were watching me. Everyone thought it ended when Karen left in cuffs. They thought the queen had fallen, the game was over, and the neighborhood could breathe again. But I knew better. Queens are never the final move. They're just the sacrifice. The email was proof. No subject, no sender, just one sentence, nice work, ready for the next round. Attached was a file, Tier 2 active development zones. Dozens of neighborhoods flagged. Ours was just the beginning. But what froze me wasn't the file. It was the attachment below it, a video. Of me. Sitting at my kitchen table, opening the email. From a camera I hadn't installed. I stared at the screen, every muscle tight. Not scared, not yet, just rewired. Because if they had that shot, if they were watching me in real time, then what else did they have? Benji paced, chewing on a pen cap like it was a grenade pin. Please tell me this is a prank, or a phishing scam, or something. No, I said, voice low, this is real. Lena tied her hair back, calm and steady like she always was in combat zones. So they've stopped hiding. That means we flushed them out. Benji snapped. Flush them out? They're in your kitchen, man. This isn't HOA nonsense anymore. This is black bag territory, federal intimidation. People vanish for less than this. I didn't argue, he was right. But I also knew something he didn't. Intimidation only works if you flinch. At 8:15 the next morning, I set the bait. I walked out of the house in plain sight, coffee mug in one hand, fat manila envelope tucked under my arm. Inside the envelope, nothing but a note scrawled in Sharpie, hope you're enjoying the view. Benji was on the roof with binoculars. Lena trailed me at a distance, hoodie up, eyes sharp. 2 blocks over, the SUV appeared. Black, tinted windows, engine humming low like a growl. It circled once, twice, then stopped, watching me. Target locked, Benji whispered through the comms. My palms sweated as I walked toward it, every step echoing Fallujah in my head. That sick gut whisper, this might be the last 5 minutes of your life. The driver stepped out. Late 40s, military posture, aviators like a textbook. He didn't draw a gun, didn't threaten. He just held up a photo. Lena at the grocery store, smiling, holding a cantaloupe. Behind her, blurred in the aisle, a man with his hand inside his coat, watching her. The photo wasn't new. It was printed creased, carried long enough to mean something. My chest burned like fire. "You think you can scare us with surveillance?" I said. The man smirked, reptilian. "This isn't surveillance, it's due diligence." "Try that again," I growled. "You've crossed into corridors you don't understand," he replied smoothly. "Federal corridors, real people are paying attention. You're not the first to dig. The others, they're quiet now. You could be too." "You don't scare me." He chuckled. "That's unfortunate, because we're not trying to scare you, we're trying to measure you." Then he pulled a file from his coat, not a weapon, a folder. Inside, old photos, grainy, surveillance shots from years ago. Me in uniform, walking out of a classified logistics site, dates marked, locations redacted. "You were on a list long before this HOA circus," he said. "You were flagged the moment you hesitated in Kirkuk." My jaw tightened. He'd cut deeper than any punch. Lena's voice came through my earpiece, steel calm. "John, step back, don't let him bait you." I stared at him hard. "You always carry this much rope." He raised an eyebrow. "For hanging yourselves." He smirked, slid back into the SUV, and drove off. Back at the house, Lena sifted through the folder slow, deliberate. "This is Lom's style," she muttered. Benji looked up. "Who's Lom?" "Covert psyops," Lena said, eyes locked on the evidence. "Likes to trigger memory scars, make soldiers question themselves, break them down before the first shot's fired." Benji blinked. "And he's running housing boards." "Shell organizations," I said, grim. "Development contracts, eviction corridors, same tactics, different battlefield." Then Lena froze, flashlight catching something on the porch. A boot print, fresh, muddy, facing inward. Someone had been standing there, watching us sleep. And then the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a storm outage. A kill switch, front yard, backyard, house, all at once. Lena grabbed a flashlight. I pulled the Glock from the drawer. We stepped outside, slow, scanning the dark. That's when she stepped in it. Wet, slick, sticky. She aimed the beam down. Red paint sprayed across the sidewalk in dripping letters. "Stand down." And beneath it, a boot print, military issue. Same tread Lena remembered from Fort Huka. I stared at that paint like it was blood. They weren't just warning us. They were testing us. And in that moment, I realized something ugly. We had just failed the silence test. Because now they knew we wouldn't back down. And we knew they weren't bluffing. Everyone thinks the hardest part of a fight is the punch. It's not. It's the pause, that split second where you decide whether to move or freeze. And I'd been here before. Kirkuk 10 years ago, 6 clicks outside the green zone. We stacked behind a crumbling brick wall, eyes on a safe house lit by a single red bulb in the stairwell. The intel packet said Tier 3 asset, smuggled out of Mosul, dangerous. But even then, something felt wrong. Kessler was at my side, tall, loud, sharp enough to cut steel. He checked his suppressor and muttered, "If this guy doesn't exist, I'm putting in for hazard pay and a punch card. 5th op this month." I grinned back. "You just don't like being bored." He smirked. "I like being alive." The breach was textbook. One bang, one pop, one crash, but the room was wrong, too quiet. No weapons cache, no men with rifles, just blankets, a torn prayer mat, a child's toy. 2 women froze in the kitchen. A boy, maybe 10, maybe less, stepped in front of them, arms out, shielding them with his tiny frame. His eyes wide, unblinking, but not afraid, defiant. Our radio crackled. "Engage, hostiles present." Kessler raised his weapon, so did I. And my trigger finger trembled, not from fear, from restraint. From the instinct that said, "Wait, don't shoot." One breath, one more, just enough time for the truth to show itself. But then the back door blew. Shrapnel ripped through the hallway, my left ear went deaf. I hit the ground, stunned, ears ringing. Kessler didn't get back up. When I rolled over, the boy was still standing, still shielding his family. And I knew the intel had been wrong. Back at base, I filed a report. Clean, detailed, truthful. Command didn't say a word, no hearing, no review, just a reassignment slip on my cot. And one note, your discretion is expected. That was the day I learned silence could be more dangerous than bullets. And now, standing in my own garage, watching Lena unbox a thermal sensor kit, the memory came back like a scar tearing open. You're flinching, she said softly. I didn't answer. You ever going to tell me what's in your head? I swallowed hard. Kirkuk, kid with his arms out, I froze, Kessler died. Lena set the gear down, crossed the space between us. She didn't interrupt, didn't soften it, just listened. I keep thinking, I whispered, if I had just acted, maybe. She cut me off, voice sharp now. You froze because you saw the truth. That's not weakness, that's humanity. He paid for it. No, she said, grabbing my wrist and pressing it against her chest. He died because someone up the chain handed you bad intel and told you to treat civilians like coordinates. You didn't kill him. The system did. Her heartbeat thudded under my palm, steady and defiant. That's why you hesitated, she said. And that's why you're dangerous to them. They want drones. You're not a drone. You're the consequence they forgot to account for. I stared at her, jaw clenched. He died because I second-guessed the mission. Lena's eyes burned. We all pay, but not all of us remember. You remember, and that's what makes you lethal. Later that night, I opened the footlocker I hadn't touched in a decade. Inside, a folded flag, a medal I refused to display, a flash drive marked review only. My hand hovered over the flag, crisp, untouched. I'd never let them unfold it at the ceremony. I didn't want speeches. I wanted silence. The kind that says, you know what this cost. I plugged the flash drive into Benji's offline rig. Redacted reports filled the screen. Not just mine. Dozens, every soldier who had questioned, every soldier who froze instead of firing at shadows. Silenced, scrubbed, reassigned. And then one name. Lam Ward. Listed not as a soldier, not as command. As a contractor, post-conflict housing transition initiatives. It hit me like shrapnel. The same name, the same man pulling strings back then was pulling them now. They buried us once, I whispered, but not this time. Benji leaned over my shoulder, eyes wide. You're telling me the same guy who scrubbed reports in Iraq is running foreclosure schemes in suburbia. Not schemes, I muttered. Systems, and our house is next. The screen glowed with proof. Folders labeled future compliance projects. Community Uplift 2023. Innocuous names hiding transfer logs, contractor payments, foreclosure pathways. And stamped across one document in bold red ink. Lot 47, safety violation, pending remediation. Our house. Lena's jaw tightened. They're coming. Then we strike first, I said. We hijacked every camera in the neighborhood. Not disabled, hijacked. Every Ring doorbell, every HOA registered Nest cam, even the park's motion sensors, not just to watch, to collect, vehicle tags, entry logs, audio chatter, patterns of movement. Benji worked like a man possessed, muttering curses at every failed password attempt. Why does this woman use 5 different logins that are all versions of her cat's name? Finally, click, the vault opened. Inside, the HOA's financial backend spilled across the screen. Messy, sloppy, but damning. Resale transitions tied to shell companies. Contractor payments routed through 3 states. The same signature at the bottom of every transfer. W. Lam. Lena leaned over the desk, her bruise still purple but her voice calm. This isn't just fraud. No, I said, this is war, and we've got the first shot. Everyone calls it a victory when the truth finally comes out. But the truth doesn't arrive like a marching band. It arrives like a crack in the wall, quiet, jagged, and then the whole house comes down. Step 1 was paperwork. I filed an injunction with the State Land Board under a regulation so old they had to fax me a scanned version. One obscure veteran protection clause was all it took to freeze every HOA-authorized transfer in the district. Their claws snapped shut on empty air. Step 2 was the leak. Benji anonymized the data trail, dumping every file into 2 reporter inboxes and a whistleblower blog run by an ex-housing attorney. Within hours, it was everywhere. 22,000 shares. Local news anchors fumbling to pronounce compliance cartel. Step 3 was public justice. Karen had always loved her community cleanup day. Balloons, flyers, speeches about harmony while neighbors picked trash out of ditches. This time we hijacked it. No speeches, no flyers, just a projector and silence. When the tape played, Karen's voice, Lam's voice, the spreadsheet, silence cracked into chaos. Gasps, shouts, a neighbor dropped her rake. An enforcer lunged for the projector cord. Benji tackled him with a knee brace and a grin. Sorry, buddy, no cancellations today. Another board member grabbed the mic, shouting about smear campaigns and doctored files. Lena stepped forward, steady as stone. She rolled up her sleeve, exposing the bruise that had never fully faded. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She was punched, someone shouted. Karen stepped up, trembling, her smile barely stapled on. This has all been taken out of context. You curated fear, I said, cutting her off. And then Mrs. Patel, quiet, cardigan-wearing Mrs. Patel, stepped up to the mic. We've been ruled by silence long enough, she said, voice trembling but unbreakable. Today we speak. The crowd roared, not just noise, not just anger. A sound that carried weight, the sound of people refusing to be invisible anymore. The enforcers fled, the board fractured, and Karen, she just stood there, hands fluttering, eyes wide with a terror she couldn't disguise. Because she finally understood. She was never in control, she was just a puppet, and the string had snapped. Later that night, the knock came again, not at my door, at hers. 2 federal agents, this time badges shown, cameras rolling. They boxed her files, seized her servers, and led her away in cuffs. No one in the neighborhood looked away. Phones filmed from every porch. Karen didn't scream, didn't plead. Queens don't always fall in fire. Sometimes they just collapse in silence. But it didn't end with her. It started with her. Because when Karen flipped, she gave them a road map, and at the top of it, W. Lam. They caught him outside a Marriott in Phoenix. Coffee in hand, sunglasses on, scrolling emails on a burner phone. He didn't run, didn't argue, didn't even blink. Agents swarmed, drones hovered, he smiled. Just smiled like it had all been inevitable. But one arresting officer later told me what he whispered in the back of the SUV. Guess the dogs bite back after all. Back in Oak Gate, cleanup began. Benji led a team to reprogram every streetlight camera to face outward, watching for threats instead of spying on neighbors. Mrs. Patel was unanimously elected HOA president. Her first decree, no more fines, only fixes. The kids came back out. Sidewalk chalk returned. Lemonade stands popped up like flowers after rain. 4th of July cookouts. Open garage doors. For the first time in years, the air smelled like cut grass, smoked ribs, and freedom. We rebuilt our fence. Same material, 1 inch taller, no violation notices, just a quiet nod from the new inspector who shook my hand and said, "Looks solid, and so do you." As for Karen, I visited her once, plexiglass between us, her county jumpsuit hanging loose on shoulders that once strutted with pastel confidence. She looked smaller, paler, eyes darting like a cornered animal. She whispered, "You don't understand. They told me if I didn't." I raised a hand, cutting her off. "You came into my home, you came for my wife, you thought I wouldn't fight." I leaned in close. But war's funny. You never know who the soldier really is until it's too late. She didn't answer. She just stared at the photo I slid across the table, Lena in the grocery store, the picture they took, the one that crossed the line. And I left it there. Back home, Lena met me on the porch with a beer and a smile that didn't need words. We sat, side by side, watching the neighborhood come alive again. Kids racing bikes. Mrs. Delaney planting roses. Benji tripping over his shoelaces, shouting, "I'm an asset to society." And for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel haunted, didn't feel on alert, didn't wait for a siren or a knock. I just breathed. Because this fight ended. No loose ends, No hidden strings, just peace. Earned, not granted. So yeah, my wife got punched by a man with a fake badge. They came for our home, our peace, our lives. But in the end, the only thing that didn't comply was my mercy. And now the HOA doesn't send me letters anymore. They send me silence. And in this neighborhood, that's the loudest kind of respect there is. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one.